Hey friends, it's your teen and tween librarian Rebecca, and we're back for another episode of Bedtime Stories. Last episode, Axel woke up from his near-death experience and walked out to see an underground ocean with light that is not from the sun and wind, and most importantly, giant mushrooms, which grossed me out. I don't like mushrooms. But now they are planning on traveling across this sea. I'm sure it's going to be super boring and uneventful, right? Right. So let's get into seeing what happens when they build the raft in chapter 31. Enjoy. Chapter 31. The Raft. The next day, I awoke completely cured. I thought that a bathe would do me good, so I went and immersed myself for a few minutes in the waters of this Mediterranean Sea, a name which it certainly deserved more than any other sea. I came back with a good appetite for breakfast. Hans did the cooking. He had water and fire at his disposal, so that he was able to vary our usual diet somewhat. For dessert, he served us a few cups of coffee, and never did that beverage strike me as so delicious. "Now," said my uncle, "the tide is rising, and we must not miss the opportunity of studying this phenomenon." "The tide?" I exclaimed. "Yes, of course." "You mean that the influence of the moon and sun can still be felt down here?" "Why not? Aren't all bodies subject throughout their mass to the power of universal attraction? And why should this mass of water escape the general law? So in spite of the great atmospheric pressure on its surface, you will see it rise like the Atlantic itself." At that moment, we were walking on a sandy beach, and the waves were gradually moving up the shore. "You are right," I cried. "The tide is beginning to rise." "Yes, Axel, and judging by the ridges of foam, I estimate that the sea will rise about 10 feet. "That's wonderful." "No, it's perfectly natural." "You may say what you like, Uncle, but it all seems extraordinary to me, and I can scarcely believe my eyes. Who would ever have imagined that inside the earth's crust there was a real ocean with ebbing and flowing tides, winds and storms?" "Why not? Is there any scientific reason against it?" "None that I can see, provided we abandon the idea of central heat." "Then so far Davy's theory is confirmed." "Clearly, and in that case there's no reason why there shouldn't be other seas and continents in the interior of the globe." "Quite, but uninhabited, of course." "Oh? But why shouldn't these waters contain fish of some unknown species?" "At any rate, we haven't seen any yet." "Well, let's make some lines and hooks and see if we'll have as much success down here as up above." "We will try, Axel, for we must penetrate all the secrets of these newly discovered regions." "But where are we, Uncle? That's a question I haven't asked you yet, and one to which your instruments must have given the answer." "Horizontally, we are 875 miles from Iceland." "As far as that?" "I'm sure I'm not more than a mile out." "And the compass still shows our direction as southeast?" "Yes, with the deviation to the west of 19 degrees 45 minutes, just as on the Earth. As for its dip, a curious phenomenon is taking place which I have observed with the greatest attention." "And what is that?" "The needle, instead of dipping towards the pole, as it does in the northern hemisphere, is pointing upwards instead." "Does that mean that the magnetic pole is somewhere between the surface of the Earth and the point we've reached?" "Exactly. And no doubt, if we were under the polar regions, near that 70th parallel where James Ross discovered the magnetic pole, we should see the needle point straight up. Therefore, that mysterious center of attraction obviously isn't situated at a very great depth." "Evidently, and that is a fact which science has never suspected." "Science, my boy, is made up of mistakes, but they are mistakes which it is useful to make because they lead little by little to the truth." "And how deep down are we?" 88 miles. "So," I said, examining the map, "the mountainous part of Scotland is above us. and the Grampians are raising their snow-covered peaks at an incredible height over our heads." "Yes," replied the professor with a laugh. "It's a rather heavy weight to carry, but the ceiling is solid. The great architect of the universe has built it with the best materials, and certainly man could never have given it such an enormous span. What are the arches of bridges and the naves of cathedrals compared to this vault, with its radius of at least 8 miles and room for an ocean and its storms underneath?" "Oh, I'm not afraid of the roof caving in. But now, Uncle, what are your plans? Aren't you thinking of returning to the surface of the earth?" "Returning? Certainly not. On the contrary, we shall continue our journey, seeing that everything has gone so well so far." "But I don't see how we are going to get down below this liquid plain."
"Oh, I've had no intention of diving into it head first. But if all oceans are properly speaking just lakes, since they are surrounded by land, and that is all the more reason why this internal sea should be circumscribed by a mass of granite."
"Yes, I can see that."
"Well, on the opposite shore, I feel sure we shall find fresh openings."
"How long do you suppose this sea to be?"
"Between 70 and 100 miles.
"Ah," I said, thinking to myself that this estimate could be hopelessly wrong.
"So there's no time to lose, and we must set sail tomorrow."
I automatically looked around for the ship which was to carry us. "Oh," I said, "so we must set sail, must we?"
"All right.
But what about a boat?"
"It won't be a boat, my boy, but a good solid raft."
"A raft!" I cried. "But a raft is just as impossible to build as a boat, and I don't see—"
"You don't see, Axel, but if you listened, you might hear."
"Hear?"
"Yes, hear some hammering which would tell you that Hans is already at work."
"Building a raft?"
"Yes."
"What? Has he already felled some trees?"
"Oh, the trees were already down. Come along and you will see for yourself."
After walking for a quarter of an hour, I caught sight of Hans at work on the other side of the promontory, which formed the little natural harbor. A few more steps and I was at his side. To my surprise, a half-finished raft was lying on the sand. It was made of beams of a special kind of wood, and the ground was literally strewn with planks, knees, and frames of all sorts. But there was enough material there to build a whole fleet of rafts. "Uncle," I said, "what wood is this?"
"It's pine, fir, and birch, all the various northern conifers, mineralized by the action of the seawater."
"Really?"
"It's what's known as surturbrand, or fossil wood."
"But then, like lignite, it must be as hard as stone and too heavy to float."
"That sometimes happens. Some of these woods have become real anthracites, but others, like these we have here, only partially fossilized so far. Look," added my uncle, throwing one of these precious spars into the sea.
The piece of wood, after disappearing from sight, rose again to the surface and rocked up and down with the movement of the waves.
"Are you convinced?"
"I'm convinced that it's incredible." The next evening, thanks to the guide's skill, the raft was finished. It was 10 feet long and 5 feet wide. The beams of the surturbrand, bound together by strong ropes, formed a solid surface, and once launched, this improvised vessel floated peacefully on the waters of the Liedenbrock Sea. And that's the end of chapter 31.